Really fact that, well, I don't like when owners sell the land to developers. It seems to me that they leave so much on the table, so much potential on the table, and let somebody else take it and run with it. Because I know how developers think, I know how developers operate. I've done it myself.
Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast, where we sit down with developers, operators, and capital partners who are creating real value in the built world with smart strategy, systems, and execution. Today's conversation is for landowners and family offices who feel stuck between two bad choices: sell the land early and watch someone else capture the upside, or try to be the developer themselves and get buried in risk, complexity, and guesswork. Our guest today has built the third path. I'm joined by Eugene Gershman, CEO of GIS Companies. Eugene runs a development management firm that helps property owners take their land from raw concept to fully executed projects without having to sell early or build an internal development team. GIS manages the full life cycle, feasibility and site analysis, capital structuring, design and entitlement, construction oversight, and ultimately lease up, sell out, and recapitalization. Owners keep control of their property. Eugene's team brings the execution engine. He also hosts a podcast, which is Real Estate Development Land to Legacy, where he brings developers, investors, and operators to unpack real development journeys, not just theory. Eugene, welcome to the show.
Louis, thank you so much. Great introduction. I'm super excited to join you on the podcast and talk about all these fun things.
Excellent. It's great to have you here. So let's start off with your path. When someone asks you in real life, what do you do? How do you answer that today?
Good question. So I was at a BizNow multifamily conference last week, and I was on the panel, and everybody introduced themselves, and they did their typical introduction. And then when my turn came, I said, I'm just a broke real estate developer sitting here waiting for the next cycle.
That's great.
But no, that's basically the life of a real estate developer, right? We are having a lot of fun during the upcycle, and then we are working twice as hard during the down cycle for literally zero pay. But that's kind of the nature of the beast. And what we've discovered recently, that if we keep buying properties and developing them for ourselves, we simply cannot make a meaningful impact on the housing crisis, on just the real estate business overall. So we picked a niche where we could work with folks who already have the land. We could help them realize what could be done. And then because we've been doing it for so long and we know so many people with money, we can help them find investors, find senior debt, structure the deal in such a way that it is financeable, and prevent those owners from making terrible mistakes that we've made in the past and that made us lose a ton of money. But, we bring all that experience to make the project successful.
Fantastic, Eugene. Your journey has been a roller coaster by your own description, starting with material supply and construction, and then general contracting, then development, and now this landowner focused development management model. So what were the key chapters that pulled you from building things to building a system specifically for landowners?
The key chapters. Well, I joined my dad's construction company 22 years ago, and reluctantly, I really didn't want to be a builder. I saw him being stressed out and tired and angry all the time. And I said, you do your thing. I'm going to go into finance. And I got my degree in economics. I work for a small financial consulting firm doing retirement projections for old folks. That got boring. I went back to school, got my MBA. Finally, my dad said, you know what, just quit screwing around. Come and join the business. I could use some people that I could trust. I'm like, okay, fine. Maybe I could actually make some money and have some fun. Construction really wasn't my thing. I started managing various different aspects, mostly financial operations, legal operations, reviewing contracts, things like that. Eventually, we started partnering with owners, developers as a contractor to get into the development side of the business. that was attractive. And then we started buying properties to really generate business for our construction company. And so we kind of learned development by, we needed new projects. We didn't have it. Instead of investing time and energy in marketing, we were investing time and energy in buying land so that we could generate business for the construction company. So that was fun sometimes. But that also allowed us to see the completely other side of the industry. See, the contractors, they operate on tiny margins. Their margins are, some specific trades, subcontractors, they could be making in residential world, sometimes 15, 20%, but that's rare because they end up losing a ton due to inefficiencies. Commercial contractors are making a lot less. Large commercial GCs are operating on like 2, 3% margins. They're able to make more by self-performing some of the trades, essentially by being a sub for one of the trades. But on the development side, that's where you could actually realize, first of all, greater returns, but you also would see greater risks. What I didn't understand at the time, and it took me years to realize that, is that by being both a developer and a contractor, yes, you are capturing more of a margin, but you're capturing so much more risk. A lot of developers don't realize, especially in the beginning developers don't realize how much risk a contractor is carrying. And to me, in the last, few years, it was really a light bulb. I'm like, why do we need all the stress of day-to-day construction operations? Because it's stressful. You're responsible literally for people's lives. Somebody falls off a, 3-story building or a ladder, or we had lots of cases, nothing, nobody died, thank God, but a guy was cut in a 2x4 on a 3rd floor, cut off a piece, and it went flying down, hit a guy walking by. He had a hard hat, he fell, he, got a minor concussion, he lived, but still, things like that happen all the time. So you're taking on the physical risk, you're taking on a ton of liability because you're responsible to so many parties as a contractor, and then you're also borrowing money as a developer. And working with investors, and you're responsible for somebody else's money. So it's just a lot of these things, they come together. And sorry, I'm rambling for so long, but your question was about the stages, and I digressed on the risks of the two operations. Eventually, the next stage was we started buying properties to develop them for ourselves, and then we shut down the construction company and went full-time, 100% developer only. But a few years ago, we started partnering with owners to help them structure deals, because a lot of people would come to us and say, hey, I've got the land, I'm working on the permits, I don't really have enough experience. Help me raise more cash, help me get bank financing, because, a lender will come in and say, you don't have enough experience, we're not going to loan money to you. So then we would come in with experience, and then all of a sudden that same lender is going to work with us.
Amazing.
And so that really became the niche. So that was the evolution of how the company, the family business, transitioned from just my dad's construction company to this multi-tiered operations, and then to pretty focused development management niche where we work with owners. And that actually allowed us to work on projects nationwide. We've been in the greater Seattle area for the last 20 plus years, but now, because we don't have a construction arm here, we can work with contractors anywhere. And so we're able to work. We just had a meeting last night with a great owner in South Carolina, working on discussing a potential project there. I had recently an inquiry from Alaska. We're looking at projects, literally all over the country. So that's been the evolution, and those were, sorry for the long answer, but that's how we got to where we are.
Amazing, Eugene. Was there a particular project or a landowner conversation where you realize there's a third path here that nobody else really is explaining to this owners?
Literally all the time. Like even the conversation that I mentioned yesterday, we were talking about, it's just raw land. Nothing's been done. There's a number of constraints. Like there's no sewer in the street. So the nearest sewer is, I think, a couple miles away. So it's a rural area. So we need to figure out how to get utilities to the site. The zoning is pretty restrictive. The owner's talking about potentially building a hotel, potentially building a restaurant, potentially building apartments, townhomes, subdivisions, like all of these ideas. And we're like, and it's a large site. So there could be multiple different things that could be built there from the like engineering standpoint. But we're focusing back and we're like, wait a second, what does the market actually need there? And, the answer is, I don't know, like just by looking at it, I don't know what the market needs. But the reality is the owner doesn't always know what the market needs. And so what we say is, hold on, let's slow down here. Let's start with analysis. Let's analyze this and see not just what we can build here, because engineers, they'll design, look at what they did in Dubai. They build islands in the ocean. If there's desire to build something, engineers will figure it out. But what does the market actually need? And that's what we need to start with. Start with the need, then start with the cost, with what is it going to cost to get it there, and then find the right balance of what's going to make the most financial sense to what is actually going to make the most market sense.
Amazing. So you're able to find a need?
We're working on it. This particular example, we're in early stages. So the first step that we need to do is a feasibility study and really analyze all possible scenarios. But by the end of the study, we're going to come back with the result and say, well, based on the data that we uncovered, here's what we think the market needs.
Amazing, amazing. You said that most property owners are presented with only two options, either sell the land or try to be a developer. From your vantage point, what's wrong with those two default paths?
Really, fact that, well, I don't like when owners sell the land to developers. It seems to me that they leave so much on the table, so much potential on the table, and let somebody else take it and run with it. Because I know how developers think, I know how developers operate. I've done it myself. When developers look at a piece of land, even if it's listed for sale, but if it's not listed for sale, they seem to take more advantage of that seller. But they come in and they place offers with a ton of different contingencies. In many cases, the money that they pay for the land, well, first of all, they don't pay everything up front. They typically put a small deposit. In many cases, it's not even a real cash deposit, it's like a note that they will transfer that money to the seller at some point. But then they go and study this thing. And that could take easily between 60 and 90 days as typical feasibility studies. And then in many cases, they say we would close on this purchase when we get the permits. And depending on your municipality, that could easily take a year or two or three. And so the seller's sitting here waiting. Well, in that time, granted, they would invest money in this project. They would go through entitlements, through permitting. And when they get those entitlements, then they close on the land. But now that land is worth, in many cases, double of what it used to be. And that's what sellers don't realize. So it just, it pains me seeing that play out. But then on the other hand is, if they just sit on the land that's not producing any income, yes, it appreciates over time. I mean, yes, real estate appreciates. Everybody understands that. But if you're not monetizing it, it's really not, that appreciation is so nominal. I mean, unless you're super lucky and you're in a fast growing city where, just a piece of dirt could triple in value in 10 years, great. But I mean, if you develop that piece of dirt, you could have achieved that same 3 times valuation growth in 3 years instead of waiting 10 years. And so I see that all the time. And it's very unfortunate because a lot of owners don't understand that potential. But the reason they don't understand that is because real estate development is extremely risky. I mean, realistically, if you don't know what you're doing, especially, it is a tremendous risk. You could make so many mistakes just by not knowing what questions to ask that you wish you didn't do it. And I mean, I've been saying it before, but I see many landowners kind of split up into two camps. One thinks that real estate development is so risky and so unattainable that they would never touch it. The other thinks that it's so easy. Like, how hard can it be? You hire an architect, you hire a general contractor, and they build it for you. Like, what's so risky? What's so difficult about it? And I'm trying to bridge that gap. No, it's not that simple. You really got to know what you're doing. And no, it's not the same as flying to the moon. It's got a lot of pieces to it. But, if you're working with someone who's done it before, who's on your side, not trying to pull the blanket on their side, it's really achievable. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Amazing, amazing. So GIS basically exists to give owners the third path, right? For landowners or family offices who never heard of development management as a service, how do you explain what you do in simple terms?
In simple terms, I am creating a real estate development department within their organization. And if it's just a private individual, it's like your own pocket real estate developer. Simple way for me to explain what I do is, and I hate this definition, but it's simplest way to explain it, is I start out as a real estate development consultant. I am basically driving the process and I'm showing you the path and I'm telling you what to do and what not to do. The difference, the reason I don't like this description is because consultants typically sell their time for money. They spend some time working on your project, you pay them for the hours that they did it, and really there's no accountability. And they would tell you, oh yes, well we want repeat business, we want you to be happy, but the reality is they sold the time and they're done. In my case, all of my profits are deferred until the very end. I'm not interested in selling time. There's plenty of consultants like Google owner's representative. You can hire a consultant that would be helping you out for just a fee. In my case, I am charging a nominal fee, much smaller than many other consultants, just to keep the operations, keep the overhead. I wouldn't do it for business, but my upside is back-ended. We actually do take equity ownership in the project by essentially reinvest in our profits. And so we are extremely motivated for that project to be successful. And that's kind of a simple explanation. We are similar to a development consultant, owner's representative, but we are also a joint venture partner that are working with the owner to ensure the success of their project.
Amazing, Eugene. All right, so I'm the landowner, okay, Eugene? I come to you with a site. What does the end-to-end journey really look like? So I have this piece of land we have a fully executed project and a real numbers on the board.
So tell me what you bring to me first. Do you just bring raw land or have you done some work already?
Raw land.
Raw land, no concepts, no ideas. So first thing that we got to do is figure out highest and best use of that land. What can we do there? And for that, we typically we call it cursory review. We would take a look at the zoning, take a look at the neighborhood, and just figure out what makes the most sense. And if it's an infill lot in a residential neighborhood, the answer is, in most cases, pretty obvious. We'll do what the neighbor's done. In many other cases, like this example that I talked about earlier, it's raw land in a rural community where you could literally do anything. Well, the zoning is pretty restrictive. So if you just look at the zoning, you can only do this one thing. But then the owner tells me that he's already talked to the county and they told him that they could generally rezone it to whatever he would ask. So he's asking, what can we do? So after we do our initial code research and our high-level review, which in many cases we would do for free as a complimentary service when clients come to us, then the next step is a formal feasibility study. That's when we actually need to engage heavy resources. And by the way, since the name of the podcast is AI Edge, we do a lot of this high-level review with the use of AI these days. Super useful, super cool, and fast. But then we go into feasibility study. And during the feasibility study, that's when we have to engage consultants. We would typically engage an architect, in many cases a civil engineer. We would we don't always do survey and geotechnical evaluation during the initial feasibility study. Sometimes we defer it until the next phase, but we need to start conceptualizing what can be done here. Then we do market research. For every single thing that we would consider building there, we need to make sure there's demand. And so if it's an apartment building, we would work with an apartment management company and somebody who knows the local market and get comparative analysis, figure out what these apartments are renting for, what the absorption rates have been, what the supply and demand in the area looks like, so that we're prepared. Then we would talk to a local general contractor, get ideas of what it's going to cost to build this building. And then by the end of it, we would put together a financial projection model, pro forma, and throw in all of the potential costs that we're expecting, cost projections that we're getting from all of the consultants that would have to be involved, from the contractor. And in many cases, we know the ratios because we are in this market. So we know that typically architecture engineer would be between 5 and 9%, 5 and 10% of construction costs. So we can budget those ratios. And then we would input the revenue figures from the data that we've collected. If it's an apartment building, if it's a subdivision, if it's a build to rent, all of those things would be fed into that model and see if the project pencils or not. And in many cases, the first iteration is usually negative, usually it doesn't pencil. And then we start dialing it down and see, well, how far off are we? And see, well, if we can build it more efficiently, if we could cut costs here, if we could redesign it there, then we call the consultants, we call the engineers, we call the contractors and be like, all right, look, the first pass wasn't working. Let's look at another conceptual. And by the way, we're not designing anything at this point. We are at a very high level conceptual budget. But if we can get to a model that pencils at that conceptual level, there's no point in going further. Once we get to the model that makes sense, that pencils on the surface, that's when we present the feasibility report. And we have had reports where we say, look, sorry, but nothing works here. And I'll give you an example. We had a project last summer. It was a downtown infill lot where the owner came in and said, this is the value of the land. That's how much we paid for it. That's how much we spent on it since. We want you to use that number as the value of the land. Then we went ahead and did the research and put together the model, and it didn't pencil. The cost of the project was higher or almost the same as the value of the finished product. So there was not enough margin. The only way, and we've been at it for months trying to figure out how to get it to work. The only way for that equation to work was to reduce the value of the land. We came to the owner and said, look, we realized that this is how much you paid for it. Based on today's dollars, we can't get it to work. Unfortunately, it appears that you may have overpaid, or maybe the value declined since you bought it, but at this value, it doesn't pencil. And I can't bring it to investors. I can't bring it to a lender because nobody's going to finance it. The only way for this to work is to reduce the value of the land. And in that case, in their case, it was quite substantial. It was like a 35% reduction in the value of the land for this project to pencil. And the owner said, thank you for this research. Thank you for the work you've done. We're going to wait. And they shut it down. They still own the land. They have been trying to sell it previously to our engagement for that price. Other developers wouldn't pay that price. So that was our indication that potentially that land is worth less than what they would like to get for it. But in some cases, that's the process. So anyway, sorry, I digressed again. Your question was about the process. At the end of the feasibility study, we have a model, we have a pathway. During this pathway, the financial analysis also allows us to financially engineer the project. So we need to figure out how do we finance it. In many cases, the project would require more investments than just the value of the land. And so then our question to the owner is, would you like to invest more to develop this project to retain more ownership, or would you like to work with outside investors? We're happy to help you find these outside investors. We know a lot of people, but that's a decision you need to make. And in many cases, what we can do is we could borrow against the land, take a bridge loan to take us through the early design and permitting phase. During that phase, we would have some cash to pay all the consultants and to continue raising capital for the project. The goal would be to raise enough capital to then pay off the bridge loan, get to the permit stage, and then go out and get a construction loan to continue building the project. So now we are getting through our design development phase and going into construction phase. During that time, we manage the construction side of things from the owner perspective. So we're not the GC. General contractors doing their work, but we oversee the general contractor. So we review all of their change orders, we review their budgets, we review their schedules, we sit in their OAC, owner architect contractor meetings to keep track on the project. We request all sorts of documentation from them, all kinds of independent third-party reports. And at the same time, while the project is being constructed, we're working with the exit team on the exit path, whatever that may be. If it's a rental project, we would be bringing in property management team and start working on marketing and pre-leasing so that by the time the project is built, it was ready to be leased up. If it's a for sale, then we would work with a local real estate brokerage team to, again, work on the marketing and the sales aspect of it. And finally, when the construction is completed, we would move into operations, lease up, or sales. And then, depending on what the final exit strategy is, we could help with eventual sale of a rental property, or if it's a for sale property from the beginning, like a subdivision or condominiums, then it's self explanatory. The project ends when the last unit is sold.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you very much for that, Eugene. On your content, you talk a lot about force appreciation. And the idea is that the biggest jump in value doesn't come from waiting on the market. It comes from moving a property along the development curve. For the owner who's never thought about it this way, can you walk us through a value actually getting created on a land deal?
Absolutely. The simplest thing is that, well, there's many kinds of developers and land developers out there. One of the most common ways to develop land is called paper development. And it sounds funny, but you're literally developing property on paper without shovels ever touching the ground. All it is you take a piece of property, you hire an engineer, civil engineer typically, to lay out a future site. In many cases, usually paper development is done for residential subdivisions. You lay out the site, you figure out the roads, infrastructure, the lots. You don't design buildings. In fact, you don't do any of the construction work. You push it through the permit. Once the permits are approved and the subdivision plan is approved, you market it for sale to horizontal developers and builders. Those guys, so now you already created value because somebody could buy a set of plans or land with a set of plans and immediately start construction and start putting in roads, infrastructure, meaning all the utilities, water, sewer, power, etc. And there's a ton of value for them because there is inevitably a number of unknowns before the permit is issued. Maybe the neighborhood gets some opposition. Maybe the city council changes and they start pushing back. There's lots of variables in time. In many large urban areas, the county or the city councils are so backed up that it could take months for your case to get on their agenda to get rezoned if that area needs to be rezoned, for example. And so that time is what a lot of developers don't like spending. And so they're willing to pay premium when somebody comes in with a set of plans that's already approved for them. So that's first step of forcing that appreciation. The second step is putting in all the infrastructure. If you build the roads, if you run all the utility lines, and in many cases, it could be miles of roads and utilities that need to be put into place. And then once you have finished built lots, you go out and you sell those lots to builders. And there's a ton of builders that would love to buy ready, flattened lot where they don't need to worry about it. They can just come in and build a house on it. And then they build a house and they sell it to the final consumer. So that's your second stage of that forced appreciation where, yes, you've created some work, but you're not really dealing with end consumers. A lot of builders, developers, they hate selling to the final consumer. They don't like dealing with husbands and wives and grandmas and children. And it creates a lot of chaos. They would much rather work in a business to business environment. So that's another stage, and finally your builders, they, in many cases, they don't like the unknowns of running utilities and road construction. And usually anything that has to do with dirt work is expensive and scary and dangerous. And many contractors hate it. I mean, I hate it. I'm notorious for underestimating what it's going to cost to do all kinds of dirt work. And it's crazy expensive. It's expensive because it's time consuming and there's a lot of unknowns that happen in the ground. Any environmental changes. We had a project once a few years ago where the geotech consultant told us that the soils here are fine, they're buildable, but keep in mind, you need to start digging the soil in the summer. If you wait until, and we're in the Seattle area where it rains a lot, it's like when this soil gets wet, it turns into muck and you build anything on it. What you have to do is you have to excavate further down until you get to the dry soil, and then you could put a building on. If you try to put a building on that wet soil, it's just going to sink in. And sure enough, we get our permit in like middle of October. And I think the permit wasn't the constraint. We got a loan, construction loan approved in October. And we're like, well, what do we do? And our choice is to wait until next summer, but we have to sign on the loan, on the construction loan, or continue building. And I said, oh, the hell with it. So let's just get going. I'm like, how bad can it possibly get? Oh, it got bad. We got hit with the worst, with the rainiest winter on record in the greater Seattle area that year. That was 2015 or 2016, I forget now. And it cost us a just tremendous amount of money. But I mean, that's why a lot of people don't like their work.
What was the lesson learned from that experience?
Lesson learned is trust your consultants. And when your geologist, when your geotechnical engineer tells you not to start construction in the fall and to wait out the winter, they probably know what they're talking about. People always ask me, well, can we do this? Can we build that? And my answer is, you can do whatever the hell you want. You could build houses on water. You could build buildings in the air. Look at all the bridges that are built around the world. You look at how they're built and how cool they look, and you're amazed. Yes, there is an engineering solution to most problems. You're probably not going to want to pay for them.
That's amazing advice. One thing I really like about your model is the fee for service approach, with upside participation later instead of just pretending to be everyone's partner from day one. So how do you think about aligning incentives between you and the landowner and the capital partners?
Yeah, the best thing is, look, I don't make any profit until this is successful. And many people push back and say, well, you're still collecting development fees. Yeah, I could literally go get a job and be making twice as much as I'm making right now if that was my goal. That's not that's not the desire. I could go back and develop one little building at a time, and that'll be enough to feed my family. But I'm trying to make an impact here. I'm trying to make a difference here, and I'm trying to create an opportunity for folks who otherwise would not have gone through the development process by sharing this knowledge and sharing this service. And that's really the unique approach that we've developed that I think is going to help a lot of people and hopefully, create a new way of approaching this very ancient profession of ours. I mean, construction development, it's really one of the oldest things that humans have been doing. So, we're changing we're changing the tools we're using, we're changing the approach we're using, and we're changing the way we're thinking about development process.
How do you usually approach bringing in GPs and LPs for capital for select projects? And what makes a project a fit for that investor participation versus just a pure fee engagement?
So as far as GPs and LPs are concerned, we are presenting them various different risk factors. If you remember earlier when I was talking about how we finance the early stages of development, the early stages could be financed with equity or they could be financed with bridge debt. Ultimately, land alone is not enough of a GP equity to finance a project. So we open up the doors to third-party investors to come in and join the GP side of the capital. The advantage for those investors is that they get to participate in the GP promote. They get to see that greater appreciation, that forced appreciation that we talked about. But they do get to take on a little bit more risk because the project is less defined. There are more unknowns. The time frame is very much unknown. We could project 3 to 5 year time horizon for a typical commercial development. But if we see some roadblocks, that could easily go up. And that's why, especially for GP side investors, we typically don't even operate on like the IRR basis. We don't quote that number because it's so much sensitive to the time. But our goal is still minimum is to double the investment. In many cases, it's triple the equity or more. And then those investors who are more risk averse or who don't want to participate in the GP in a more riskier side of the equation, they could wait. wait until the permits are in hand or approved, wait until the senior capital or senior debt is identified with term sheets and pre-approvals and everything. At that point, they know that the building has been designed. There is usually a guaranteed maximum price contract from a general contractor. So we know the costs. We know the timeframes. At that point, the building is designed, so the contractor is able to put together a firm schedule. The permits are available, so we don't need to wait for them. The debt is ready to be deployed, so many of the variables are already known. And so when LP capital comes in, there's typically a preferred return that's paid out to them, and they get to participate in the upside of the project. So that's the approach. As far as where we live, we typically live on the GP side of the equation, and we figure out we figure out the split between the original owner and the new GP investors, GP side investors that come in. Typically, it's some sort of a pari passu based on the value of their investment. In some cases, I should mention, landowners have come to us and said, here's our land, we'll contribute it to the joint venture. We don't want to be the GPs. Put us in the LP bucket. We're fine. We don't want to be involved. We don't want to know what you're doing every day. Send us quarterly reports. Happy to be LPs, and then we're happy to be the first ones out. And we're flexible in how we structure it.
That's a huge lesson for people that are listening in. Thank you for that information. That's excellent. For an owner listening who's never run a development team, the idea of managing architects, engineers, traffic consultants, lenders, contractors in the city sounds overwhelming, right? So what does a good team assembly and leadership look like on a project like that?
Well, first thing I always ask is, what else have these consultants done before? There are so many consultants out there who would love to work with you and take your money, but lack exact experience. It's not to say that they're inexperienced at all, but if they haven't done this particular type of a project before, I would be very cautious. I would love to work with people who have done that exact thing before so that it's more predictable, so that they know what to expect. Another thing is I like working with teams that have worked together before. People are still people. No matter how much we use technology and online collaboration and whatnot, emotions are still there. And there's an ongoing conflict between architects and contractors. It's inherent to the way this industry is built, and it's not necessarily unhealthy. That conflict is good. There should be mutually exclusive interests between them. And so I like working with teams that have worked together before. Many times when I go into the area that I haven't been before, where I don't have a huge pool of consultants or contractors to choose from, I would many times call the city or the county and say, who do you like? Who have you worked with before that that plans are usually good? There's less feedback, there's less friction. And I would start from there. Then I would call that architect or that civil engineer and I said, which contractors do you like working with? And that again is going to be based on the experience of them working together in the past. And so when you put together a team of people that have worked together before, you're more likely to have a successful project. But outside of that, communication, constant communication, frequent meetings. In the world of Zoom calls and conference calls and passive aggressive emails, in-person meetings are so valuable and so important that there's no way to run a project without in-person communication. You could schedule a call and talk about all of the agenda points, but it's the little details that happen around the water cooler that matter so much. Yeah, it's like managing a development project is like conducting an orchestra. You have all of these different instruments playing at the same time, and you have to keep the pace, keep the rhythm, and make sure that they're on the same page.
That's great advice. Thank you, Eugene. You described your career journey as a roller coaster, which is very real in this business. In today's environment, rates, construction costs, political shifts, city backlogs. How are you thinking about risk management for your owners?
Well, the most important thing is understanding where we are at in the economic cycle of things. and what to expect. For example, I've been following these economists for a couple of years now who are forecasting a massive global recession that's going to hit most developed countries in the early 2030s. Uh, I've read a lot of their analysis, and I happen to agree with their conclusion is that uh, early 2030s is probably going to be beginning of the end of a lot of the civilized uh, economies in the way they're structured, and there's going to be a lot of changes. I think today, sitting at the end of 2025, we have to realize that if we're sitting on land that's not producing sufficient income or any income, if we have assets that are highly leveraged, we have a very short window of time to do something about it. From basically 26 until I don't know when that massive decline is going to happen. If it's going to happen right in 2030 or maybe 2032, but I would like to be ready by then. We have a really short window of time, so that's one thing that I'm looking for, and I've been talking about it quite a lot in the last few days, that we need to utilize this window of time to start working on new projects and ensure that before that decline happens, we have A, an income producing property, B, a property that is not very highly leveraged. Because anything that has high debt is going to be at high risk. Speaking of debt, to answer your question from another angle, is that's another huge advice. There are multiple ways of developing properties and building projects. And in the previous growth cycle, it was so easy uh, to get high leverage in projects, meaning borrow too much money. And I've burned with that on one of our projects. We borrowed way too much. And when interest rates started climbing, we couldn't refinance. And we ended up losing the project. And that was very painful. And so the lesson that I learned and the lesson that I'm trying to teach everybody that I talk to who listen to these podcasts is to utilize debt and leverage in a smart way. It is an amazing tool, and I would never recommend anybody build their project for their own cash. Always borrow, but don't borrow too much. 50, 60% is safe. 65 is on the edge. Anything above 65% leverage, I would be very concerned. And if it's a short flip, if it's a very quick construction cycle, you could probably be okay. But on a larger commercial project, I really wouldn't be comfortable. And what that means to investors, to GPs or LPs, is that your IRRs are going to be reduced because you're not borrowing as much. But trust me, you'd rather have less profit than risking losing it all.
That is great advice. Thank you for that information. So, Eugene, what are the biggest risks that you're trying to eliminate or control early in a project? And what are the ones that you accept and price into the deal?
So we already talked about leverage. That's an important one. I am very cautious about debt. Other big risks are, cost of construction and cost of real estate, because those things are fairly unpredictable. What we do accept is that the overall market is what it is. We can't control our competitors. We can't control our suppliers. We have to live with it. The way we mitigate construction costs is we bring in a contractor on day one. We don't, we used to work with independent cost estimators. I don't like doing that anymore. A lot of people believe in design, bid, build approach, where they get one set of consultants to design the project and then they bid it out. They get the lowest bidder to build it. I don't want to take that risk. Public projects, governments do that all the time. I don't want to take that risk. I would rather pick a contractor on day one, and I don't care if I get the lowest contractor, because you know what? If that guy is the lowest bidder, he either underestimated and missed something, and you can't hold him liable for it. Yes, you can in the contract, but the reality is, if that contractor fails, replacing that contractor is going to be way more expensive and it's going to take way too much time. And going after that contractor is, in most cases, you're not going to get much out of him anyway. So I would never advise getting the lowest bidder. So I would rather get the contractor early on. And I tell all of my GCs is, look, I don't need you to estimate the job to get it on day one. I really want to see your fee proposal. How much fee are you making? I would like to see your general conditions, general requirements. I want to see how you break up the overhead cost. That's really all that matters. The rest of it, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. And so that's how we hedge construction cost risk. And the market fluctuations, we generally accept it. There's nothing we could do about it. I mean, we'll look at the trend lines. We'll look at the general supply demand. If we see way too many apartments being built, we're cautious about it. But all that means to us is we need to make sure that profit margin is there. So if we need to cut costs in short term to rent them out, then that's what we need to count on.
Dropping some huge value there, Eugene. Thank you very much for that. That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about AI and technology. So this show lives in the intersection of real estate and systems, and increasingly that includes technology and AI. From your perspective, where does technology and data actually help landowners and development managers, and where is it overhyped?
So in my utopian dream world, what I would love is I would love to plug in the address into the system and have it spit out a complete feasibility study analysis for me in minutes. And then I would love to feed in the description of what I want to build into another prompt and have it spit out a set of plans that are fully designed, vetted, code compliant, and ready to be used in the field. And then I would love my municipality to have their review process be automated so that I could just upload the set of plans, have some sort of an AI agent scan through it, give me the thumbs up, and then we could go in the field. I think that would be the most amazing thing. We are slowly getting there. I mentioned it earlier. We do use AI for site analysis, feasibility analysis, super useful. What used to take weeks now takes minutes. I love the deep search mode between. So we've experimented with Gemini, Grok, and ChatGPT for that. Right now, we're kind of between. I loved Grok at first. Well, ChatGPT I think was the first one that came up with deep research. That was awesome. It had some quirks that it needed to work through. Then I love Grok, and then recently I started using Gemini, and I'm a fan of Gemini now. But we've since built our custom GPT in Chat, and we're working on building a custom Gem in Gemini now for site analysis, code analysis. Super useful. Deep search mode takes, a good 20 minutes to complete, but it is very thorough, very detailed. Still needs to be guided. It's helping. We'll love it. I think we're going to use more of it in the future as technology develops, and that's going to save us a ton of time. I know that many municipalities are already employing some sort of AI plan checking system. And so that's definitely going to help. What I would really like to see is I would love to see a tech that would be able to scan the plans and at least identify major code compliance issues, because those have been mostly manual. And on one of our last projects, we had multiple code related errors that the design team made. And they weren't obvious. The design team missed it. Some of the suppliers who supplied materials missed it. Our construction team missed it. And then it got flagged by the inspector when the framing was already built. And so now we have to go back, we have to rebuild, we have to redraw, resubmit, we have to hire a separate consultant, code consultant to analyze it. And it just caused a ton of delays, a ton of money. So those are the things that I would love to see more of.
Have you seen it do any type of underwriting or capital stack?
We've used it for underwriting and capital stack. It's not quite able to work with complex financial models yet, at least not the ones that I've seen. I would love to experiment if it exists. It's funny, I was talking to a grandpa the other day, and he recently learned about AI and was asking me what I think. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's cool. We use it all the time. He's like, yeah, it probably can spit out your financial model super quick. I'm like, no, it's not quite as smart. And he laughed. He thought that I'm just pumping myself up, that I'm smarter than AI. I'm like, no, I mean, it's definitely has more knowledge than me, but it's not quite. So we're getting there. I mean, as far as just literature, financial literature, PPMs, documents, decks, it's like slide decks. Yes, we use that all the time. As far as actual financial analysis underwriting, to a certain degree, we're in a process of taking our favorite Excel model and supplementing it with basically trying to extract all of the fields where the data is manually inputted into a separate tab, so that we could take our feasibility analysis, run it through an AI model, populate those fields, and so that the model could run itself. We'll see how it works, but it's in the process.
Excellent. How about as far as communication and reporting to owners and investors?
It helps. It helps. Right now, and just because just generally a geek, I love playing with it, and I swear I spend more time using AI to prepare reports than if I would have just written them. But um, but yes, it's in the process.
Excellent. If you were advising a landowner or a small family office on this, what are one or two simple tools or systems that they should have in place before they even think about development?
Simple tools that they should have in place. Well, I would say they don't really need to have their own tools. They should just know which tools to use. Like, for example, the custom GPT that I mentioned earlier for site analysis, we are in the process of making it publicly available on our website. And what I would encourage every owner to do, whether they're an individual or a family office or an institution that holds the land, to go in there, plug in your address, plug in your zoning, because a lot of times it can't extract zoning automatically yet, and just use it and see what the code tells you. And they'll save a ton of effort on the front end.
That's fantastic. Let's speak directly to the landowners for a minute. If someone owns a piece of land, maybe it's been in the family for years, or it's a property that they bought a while back, and they're thinking, I just don't want to sell this raw, but I have no idea where to start. What are their first three steps?
The first three steps, well, the first thing they got to do is think about the potential. What could actually be built there? Feasibility study is not that complicated. In fact, what I've done is we put together a feasibility study checklist and we put it on our website. So any owner can go in there. Please do. It's a free download. Go to giscompanies.co, download the feasibility study checklist, and just read through it. And those are the things that I would recommend anybody does before they make a decision of what to do with their land. Once they figure out what the potential is, it would really help to put together a conceptual financial model of a potential development, because that would really dictate what that land is worth. And many, appraisers would say, well, just look at the comps. Yes, you could look at what other sites sold for, but other sites is not your site. There could be other variables. There could be other constraints. You don't know everything. And even a professional appraiser would use a comp analysis as just one of the methods. But then they would also look at potential development analysis as another method to see what that valuation is. Like in the example that I mentioned earlier, when the owner came to us with the land, they thought the value was X. With that value, we couldn't get the project to pencil. I know that that's what they paid. And a typical appraisal wisdom would tell you that fair market value of the property is what a willing buyer and a willing seller are willing to trade it at, right? So just because they bought it, a wisdom would suggest that that's the value. But when you plug in that value into a new development, it doesn't work anymore. And so it's important to build even a simple conceptual model to understand that. So I would say if you could do it yourself, do it yourself. If not, please spend a little bit of money to hire a professional to help you with that. It's honestly, in the big scheme of things, it's not that much money. And, we call it a parking ticket, right? It's kind of annoying to have to pay it sometimes, but, it's a blip on a radar. I would say the third one is ask yourself what your ultimate goal is. What would you like to see in the future? Not necessarily in connection with this land, but let's say you sold it, you got the money. Then what? What do you do with the money? What is your general objective? And let that objective decide what you want to do with the property.
That's gold. Excellent. What's the most common misconception that you hear from landowners when they first come to you?
Well, the development is too complex, too risky, too too unexpected. That's not the thing. That's not the word I'm thinking of. Just too complex. That's probably the most common. A lot of times when we propose a feasibility study and we ask for a fee, we get pushback that they don't want to pay for that study. And I mean, that's fine. I usually tell people, look, you could wash your own car or you could run it through a car wash. You could do your own taxes or you could hire a CPA. You could do your own feasibility study or you can hire a professional. Yeah, some people have strange pushbacks, but there are professionals who do these things all the time. And that's why we use them. it's not rocket science to do your taxes, but many of us choose to use services of a CPA to do that.
Amazing, amazing, Eugene. You have a lot of inspiring developers and operators following your content in your podcast, Land to Legacy. For someone who wants to grow from broker to investor into real development, what do you need them to understand about this business before they step into it?
Understand the risks. That I would say that's the main thing. Is anything that has to do with development construction, there are so many different risks, and the challenge is that not a lot of people know what they are. And when you don't know what the risks are, it sounds some people are either scared by it, others rush into it because they don't understand it. And so that's what I would say is just ask questions, talk to as many people as you can, make your own decision, and know that many of the risks are avoidable if you know what questions to ask and when to ask them.
Excellent. What skills or experiences have been most transferable and valuable for you, whether it be finance, construction, leadership, or something else?
Oh, man. Development is, like I said, it's kind of like conducting an orchestra with so many different trades. Another example I recently heard is real estate development is like a film production. So that producer is working with directors, actors, builders, set builders, artists, all kinds of financial lawyers, like all different trades, and they're all managed by this one team. So that's what we do. We literally need to know a little bit of everything.
Amazing, amazing. And on the character side, what traits have kept you in the game through this roller coaster of seasons?
What traits? I mean, man, resiliency, I guess. It's been difficult at times.
Sounds
You would hear bad news every day, multiple times a day. And sometimes you wake up and you're like, why the hell am I doing this? So, focus, motivation, but yeah, resiliency, I think is the main trait.
fantastic. Eugene, this has been incredibly clear and practical. You've laid out a path for landowners to actually capture the upside that they're sitting on without pretending that they need to become a full-time developer overnight. For people that want to learn more about GIS companies, your development management model, or following and thinking about what you're doing, where's the best place to find you online?
Our website, giscompanies.co, no M in there. Check it out. Lots of useful information. Our blog, our podcast, the free downloads. So we've have the I mentioned feasibility study checklist. We're also working. I think it's about to launch for on the financing side of things. We're going to have a little scorecard that would help developers understand, estimate if their project is ready for financing or if it needs additional work. Pretty useful tool to check out. And then for investors too, we have a section called Invest With Us that talks about GP and LP investing. So super useful. Check it out, giscompanies.co. I'm on LinkedIn primarily. Look me up, Eugene Gershman. Otherwise, on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, EG_developer. And yeah, check out Real Estate Development Land to Legacy.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll drop all those links in the show notes. Eugene, thanks again for coming out and giving landowners and families a real thoughtful, realistic third option between selling too early and taking on more risk than they can handle. This has been the AI Edge podcast. If you got value from this episode, share it with a landowner, family office, or advisors who are sitting on a site and trying to figure out what to do next. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, Louis. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Eugene.